Good morning, friends. There have been a lot of speculations around regarding cash payments above rupees 2000 from foreign funds. Many FCRA registered organizations are stuck in a dilemma as they are unable to restrict the cash payments up to rupees 2000 due to various factors, but at the same time have fear that they might have to face the wrath of FCRA department. Even most of the auditors are found to be in the same dilemma regarding reporting of such payments during the audit. I am Ashish Agarwal from team NGOenabler, and in this video we will talk about the cash transaction advisory under FCRA regarding cash payment above rupees 2000 from both organization and auditors perspective. So let's first discuss the background for this topic. The Foreign Contribution Regulation Act 2010, more popularly known as FCRA 2010, is designed to regulate foreign contributions to ensure transparency and prevent misuse of foreign funds. While Rule 6 of the Foreign Contribution Regulation Rules 2011 mandates that all expenses must be utilized for the purposes for which they have been received, there is no specific statutory limit on cash transactions under FCRA. I repeat, there is no specific statutory limit on cash transactions under FCRA. However, the Ministry of Home Affairs has issued an advisory recommending that cash payments from FCRA funds should not exceed rupees 2000. This advisory serves as a best practice guidance to promote accountability and encourage digital transactions. But it does not carry the force of law. I repeat, it does not carry the force of law. Now let's move on to the topic and first see it from the perspective of audit. Since rupees 2000 limit is not legally binding, organizations cannot be penalized for exceeding this limit unless such transactions violate other provisions of FCRA. However, adherence to this advisory is recommended to enhance transparency and mitigate risks of fund mismanagement. Even if the advisory is not mandatory, auditors must verify whether cash transactions are properly documented with receipts, vouchers, and approvals. Excessive cash withdrawals or transactions may indicate poor financial controls, which should be flagged as a risk area in the audit. Cash transactions inherently pose a higher risk of fraud, fund diversion, or non-traceable expenditures. I repeat, cash transactions inherently pose a higher risk of fraud, fund diversion, or non-traceable expenditures. Auditors should scrutinize cash withdrawals and assess whether expenses align with the approved objectives of the FCRA registration or not. NGOs should be encouraged to adopt internal policies limiting cash expenses even if the law does not impose a statutory cap. Implementing digital and banking transactions for FCRA funds enhances transparency and reduces regulatory scrutiny. Since there is no legal prohibition on cash transactions exceeding rupees 2000, auditors should not qualify the audit reports solely on this basis. However, if excessive cash transactions exist, auditor may highlight this as a best practice recommendation rather than a compliance violation. Moving on to the organization's perspective, from the perspective of organization, it needs to be remembered that rupees 2000 cash transaction limit under FCRA is advisory in nature and not a strict legal requirement under Rule 6 of FCRA Rules 2011. However, following this limit is a good governance practice to improve transparency and mitigate risks of fund mismanagement. So what are the best practices for managing FCRA cash transactions? Minimize cash payments and use banking channels such as NEFT, RTGS, check or demand draft for all transactions above rupees 2000. Nowadays, you can also use UPI transactions which can be directly linked to the bank account of the organization. Maintain proper documentation, that is the receipts, invoices and approval notes for every cash transaction regardless of the amount. Strengthen internal controls to prevent unnecessary cash withdrawals and ensure transparency in fund utilization. At last, avoid splitting transactions to bypass rupees 2000 advisory limit, as this may raise concern during regulatory audits. So what are the risk considerations for excessive cash transactions? While cash transactions above rupees 2000 do not constitute a violation in itself, frequent or large cash withdrawals may raise compliance concerns. NGOs should be prepared to justify such transactions with adequate documentary evidence if questioned by the regulatory authorities. If cash payments are unavoidable, example, for expenses in remote areas whose banking facilities are limited, then they should be clearly recorded and justified in the books of accounts. Moving on to the conclusion, although the rupees 2000 cash transaction limit under FCRA is not legally binding, it is strongly advisable to follow this guidance to maintain financial transparency and compliance readiness. Adhering to this recommendation will help the organization reduce compliance risks and align with best governance practices. Auditors should ensure that all cash transactions are well documented and, where necessary, suggest improvements in internal controls and financial management without treating this advisory as a mandatory compliance issue. In our opinion, we would like to recommend that the organization establish an internal policy to limit cash expenses and ensure that all FCRA fund utilization is well documented and bank transacted wherever possible. If you require any assistance in developing the organizational policies in line with the applicable rules and regulations, contact us and our team will help you develop the best possible policies to strengthen internal controls and establish robust system in your organization. For more such updates and tutorials, keep tuned to our channel. Don't forget to subscribe it and put your notifications on. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn. For any clarifications, feel free to reach out us through mail or comment below. Thank you.